Hello, my name is Lewis and welcome to day 10 of Decktober, and today we're looking at the $85 budget Florian Voldaren Scion deck tech. Florian is a 3-3 with first strike. This is at the beginning of your post-combat main phase. Look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the total amount of life lost this turn. Exile one of those cards and put them on the bottom of your library, and you can play exile card this turn. This deck is all about dealing as much damage to your opponents, so you can use Florian's ability to get out some big cards to deal even more damage or drain your opponents further to get their life total to 0. Now, let's get right into the budget deck tech. As always with these budget brews, we're starting off with the ramp, and here we have got Dark Ritual to add 3 Swamp to your mana pool, and Seething Song to add 5 Mountain to your mana pool. There is Mana Geyser to add a mountain for each tap land your opponents control, and Talisman of Indulgence to add a generic or to tap for either Rakdos but deals 1 damage to you. We've got Arcane Signet to add black or red, and Commander Sphere to again have that Rakdos option but also draw us a card. There is Rakdos Cluestone and Signet for some more classic mana rocks, with again the Cluestone having that secondary option to draw a card. For some mana-based creatures, we have Prosper Tomebound to create us a treasure token whenever we play a card from exile, and Runaway Steamkin that adds a +1/+1 counter whenever you play a red spell, with the ability to remove 3 +1/+1 counters and add 3 mountain. There is Skullport Merchant that ETBs with a treasure token, and we can sack creatures or treasure to draw a card, and Storm Kiln Artist that says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you create a treasure token. And finally, we have Sol Ring, because Sol Ring. Before we get onto all of that opposition damage, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe for all things MTG. It's completely free to do, and it helps the channel grow and grow as we head towards 2,000 subscribers. Now we're looking at all those ways to drain our opponent's life total. First up, we have Blood Tithe to make each opponent lose 3 life, with you gaining life equal to the total life lost. And we have Gary that when ETBs, each opponent loses life equal to your devotion to black, with you again gaining life equal to this total life lost. We have Cut to Ribbons to deal 4 damage to target creature, with the Aftermath mechanic to lose X life. And for a bit more life drain and gain, we have Siphon Soul to deal 2 damage to each other player, and you gain life equal to total damage done this way. There is Ill-Gotten Inheritance that at the beginning of your upkeep it deals 1 damage to each opponent and you gain 1 life, with the added option to pay and sack it to deal 4 damage to target opponent and you gain 4 life. And there's Retreat to Hagra that whenever a land hits your side of the field, you can drain each opponent for 1 and you gain 1. There is Sanctum of Stone Fangs that at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase deals 1 damage to each opponent and you gain 1 life. There is only 1 shrine in this deck though. And Night Market Lookout that when it becomes tapped, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. We want all of those guaranteed life draining options, as the more life we take from our opponents, the more cards that Florian can peek at when drawing from your library. There is Gutter Snipe that says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Gutter Snipe deals 2 damage to each opponent, and Firebrand Archer that when you cast a non-creature spell, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. There is Plague Spitter that at the beginning of your upkeep deals damage to each player and each creature, also doing the same damage when put into a graveyard from play, and Stormfist Crusader that says at the beginning of your upkeep, each player draws a card and loses a life. For some more opponent draining, we have Loyal Subordinate that says at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control your commander, each opponent loses 3 life. And Slagstorm to deal 3 damage to each creature or each player. There is Smash to Smithereens for some artifact removal with the extra 3 damage to artifacts controller, and Flame Rift to deal 4 damage to each player. We've added some Sizzle to deal 3 damage to each opponent, and Shepherd of Rot to tap and make each player lose a life for each zombie in play, of which in this deck there are about 4 or 5 potential zombies. Let's also hope that your opponent is running Zombie Tribal. There is Spear Spewer to tap and deal 1 damage to each player, and Pestilence to pay a black and deal 1 damage to each creature and player, and if there are no creatures then Pestilence must be destroyed. We've got a Roiling Vortex that at the beginning of each player's upkeep it does 1 damage to them, and if a player casts a spell and no mana was cast to pay it, Roiling Vortex does 5 damage to that player. And Pulse Tracker that when attacks each player loses 1 life. Next is Mardu Shadow Spear that when attacks each opponent loses 1 life with that added dash mechanic, and Vicious Conquistador that when attacks each opponent loses 1 life. We've also added Tectonic Giant that when attacks or becomes the target of a spell deals 3 damage to each opponent, and Sin Prodder that at the beginning of your upkeep you reveal the top card of your library and any opponent may put that card into your graveyard. If they do, Sin Prodder deals damage to that opponent equal to that card's mana value. Otherwise, you get to put the card straight in your hand. There is Price of Progress that deals damage to each player equal to twice the number of non-basic lands that player controls, and Skewer the Critics to deal 3 damage to any target, with that cheaper Spectacle option. We've got Rakdos Charm to have each creature deal 1 damage to its controller, and Thermo Alchemist to tap and deal 1 damage to each opponent, with the chance to untap it whenever you cast an instant or sorcery. There is Grape Shot, an instant with Storm to deal 1 damage to any target, and Fiery Confluence to deal 2 damage to each opponent that we can also use as some nice artifact removal. Finally, we have Warlock Class to get all those ways to kick our opponents while they're down and drain them some more at the beginning of our end step. The whole strategy with Florian is to just have an endless barrage of cards draining our opponents. We're hopefully completely draining them before they can build up any sort of army to swing back at us. Now let's look at some of the biggest cards we want to be getting out with those Florian triggers. So we're looking at all of the big hitters that we really want to be smacking our opponents with. First up is Direfleet Ravager, that when ETBs each player loses a third of their life rounded up, and Heartless Hidetsugu to tap and have each player dealt damage equal to half their life total rounded down. We've got Scourge of the Skyclaves that when you cast, if it was kicked, each player loses a half their life total rounded up, and its power and toughness are equal to 20 minus the highest life total among players. And there's Blood Tribute that when cast, if it's kicked, target opponent loses half their life rounded up, with you gaining life equal to total life lost. That is brutal. We've got Bergie to gain us some mana that we don't lose through phases, and Big Budget Breaker Neheb that on your post-combat main phase gains you a mountain for each 1 life lost by opponents' turn, with the Afflict 3 mechanic to drain your opponents more when Neheb is blocked. There is also Bergie's flip side if we wanted to exile some cards and play them during our turn. We've got Rakdos Lord of Riots that says creature spells cost 1 less to cast for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn, and Zagras Thief of Heartbeats to cheapen creature spells for each party creature, give all of your creatures Death Touch, and have some tasty Planeswalker removal. We've got huge spell Crackle with Power to tap X 3 times, and it deals 5 times X damage to each of up to X targets. That is massive. And Temporal Extraction that gives you an extra turn, which target player may counter if they lose half their life rounded up. An extra turn in black, what a card. There is Electro Dominance to deal X damage to any target, and you may cast a card with mana value X or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. And Court of Ambition that says at the beginning of your upkeep, if you are the monarch, each opponent loses 6 life unless they discard 2 cards. Finally, we have Dictate of the Twin Gods, a flashy enchantment that says if a source would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage instead. Now before we finish with the lands, we're looking at the removal and the best of the rest in this Florian deck. First up there is Cryptborn Horror that ETBs with X11 counters on it, where X is the total life lost by opponents' turn, and Wild Magic Sorcerer that says the first spell you cast from exile each turn has Cascade. There is Light Up the Stage to exile the top 2 cards of your library. Until the end of your turn you may play those cards, and Theatre of Horrors to exile you a card at the beginning of your upkeep. You may pay to have Theatre of Horrors do 1 damage to target opponent or planeswalker, and if your opponent lost life during your turn, you may play lands and cast spells from among cards exiled with Theatre of Horrors. Finally, we have Terminate to destroy target creature. As always, we're finishing up with the lands, and in this budget brew we are rocking 14 basic Swamp and 14 basic Mountain. We've also got always trusty commander cards in Command Tower and Exotic Orchard to help fix our mana, and more trusty staples in Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse to sack and get out some basic lands tapped. There is Piranha Marsh that when ETBs, target player loses 1 life, and Bajuka Bog to exile all cards from target player's graveyard. Finally, we've added in a Rogue's Passage just to try and get some of those big creatures we've got unblockable. Florian is a really interesting new commander option from Innistrad Midnight Hunt, and definitely a devilishly fun option if you want to drain the living lights out of your opponent's life total. Be sure to check out Decktober Day 11 tomorrow, where we'll be looking at another new commander option from Innistrad Midnight Hunt. There we have it, that is the Florian $85 budget deck tech. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe for all things MTG. Check out our link tree in the description below for all of our social media and affiliate links. For now though, I'm all tapped out, so I'll see you in the next video.